Welcome to the second episode of the Trio, part of the Monday Morning Learning podcast series. Warm welcome to three of you, Sujatha, Sanjiv, and Nathan. Today, we ask a critical question in an age of AI and analytics. How do we retain the human in human resources? We're joined by three visionary HR leaders who will explore this theme through three focused lenses. One, HR as the heart of organization. Two, balancing AI, data, and the human touch. And three, leading with purpose, not just process. And our guest, Dr. Sujatha Muthanna, Head Infosys Learning Advisory. Warm welcome, Sujatha.
Thank you so much, Ravikant.
Thank you. Sanjiv Agarwal, Head HR Southeast Asia, Swiss Re. Welcome, Sanjiv.
Thanks, Ravi.
And S.V. Nathan, co-founder and chairman, Vistara Human Capital Consulting, and ex-talent head of Deloitte. So they bring warm welcome, Nathan.
Nathan, if you please.
Nathan, yes, sorry. Yes. They bring insights that go beyond process to help reimagine HR as a force for connection, care, and culture. So let's dive in. We'll look at the first question for Dr. Sujatha Muthanna. We're looking at HR as a heart of the organization, Sujatha, more than just a function. In a world increasingly driven by automation and analytics, how can HR continue to be the heartbeat of an organization and drive meaningful human connections, according to you?
So, HR analytics and staying true to the human essence, it's such a compelling topic. And while it kind of juxtaposes the core tension that we have between data-driven decision-making and the true essence of what HR does, which is being aligned with people, right? So given that, I think it's an exciting journey ahead, definitely, when we're talking about bringing in AI and automation and all the technology and anything new that's going to come into the market as well and into our lives. However, HR analytics, while it is powerful, it's not the entire story. So there's a lot more of human emotions, empathy, and values that probably we need to bring in. And I'm just going to share some perspectives around, while there are some steps that have been taken to embrace HR analytics in the space of, recruitment, or in making sure that the help desk management of the HR functions are more effective. You still have to look at how are we comprehending the use of HR analytics when we are engaging people. There's a lot of effort that's gone in there, but how are we engaging people? What happens when we're talking about a leadership pipeline, right? How are we looking at some of the extreme cases? I come from a background of design thinking, and I tend to bring in a little bit of extreme design. And we're talking about an inclusive ecosystem. And if we have to build an inclusive ecosystem, we have to bring in the elements of extreme design out here. And when we're talking about extreme design, data typically gives you patterns, and the patterns are drawn from a bulk of information that gets into the data lakes. And in the data lakes, we may not really be having too much of the outlier data that comes in. And in extreme design, it's important for us to bring in some of these outliers. And the outliers typically would hinge around emotions, things that people are going through, right? If I give you an example of people in an organization, or some people in an organization who might be taking care or might be caregivers in their families, where there is somebody who's going through a critical, illness, right? They go ahead and compete with their peer group in the organization when they deliver the tasks. But they may not be willing to share the kind of effort and the anxiety and the difficulty that they're going through in managing as a caregiver for a critical patient, critical illness patient. So we'll have to consider that. And there are some of these elements. And we can look at other things. We have women who are going through menopausal changes. We have people, young mothers who've just come out of, a delivery, but who might have had a lot of challenges. Not everything gets captured in the data. right? Again, it depends on the culture of the organization, but not everything yet can get captured in the data. And as an executive life coach, leadership coach, I know that, and as a pro bono coach, I have a lot of individuals who I coach, and when they come back from various other organizations, and then we get to hear that they're not talking about this within the organizations for various reasons. So that means there's a lot of data that is not captured. So when we're talking about people engagement in the organization, and if patterns are drawn from performances of individuals just depending on what has been reported, there's a lot of information that is unsaid. And then how are we going to capture that information so that individuals and the different challenges that they're going through is also inclusive, right? So, and we're talking about very diverse backgrounds. We're talking about a generation today which may not be expressing everything in the ecosystem, the work setup. And we are sensing that it could be because of various reasons. It could be, the generation itself, or it could be the culture of the organization. So taking into consideration all these aspects, the data lakes that are put together in organizations need to take into consideration this kind of information. Otherwise, it might just have part of the information which gets captured when they are drawing insights and taking very important decisions for the journey of an individual, where some of these don't get captured. So I think it's important to have a beautiful blend. When we're talking about data, we have explicit knowledge, we have implicit knowledge. There's a lot of implicit knowledge that is not captured. And that's the journey of making sure that AI and automation captures all of it. I think we have some ground to cover out there. And in sentient organizations, you're looking at thinking, feeling, sensing. It's important to still hold on to the feeling and the sensing part of it and not just go into the logical part of it. And that's the reason why that's the need for us to kind of balance HR decision making through analytics alone versus continuing with some of the empathy conversations that are so critical for people development.
Absolutely, Sujatha. Thanks so much.
Right.
Moving on, I think balancing AI data and the human touch in HR. I think with AI transforming HR, the challenge is using data as a guide rather than a replacement for human judgment. So, Sanjeev, how can HR leaders strike the right balance between leveraging AI-driven insights and making decisions that prioritize human emotions, ethics, and intuition?
Thanks, Ravi. I really liked how Sujatha put it, the gaps in data and what it leads to when you just depend on that. The way I look at this situation, right, it's, if I can use an analogy, we use Google Maps. Google Maps has very good analytical insights when you want to go from point A to point B. It tells you what is the shortest route, what kind of tolls you will have, all sorts of things. You can add a detour, I want to go fill petrol first, all of that stuff. That's AI at its best. Yet, it doesn't tell you how to drive on the road. If the road is bumpy, you need to slow down. That's a judgment that the driver has to make. If you have traffic on the road, do you pause, give way to people crossing the road or not? That the AI is not telling you. That is your ethical conditioning of what choices you make. Right? Do you overtake rashly? Do you not? Do you stay in the lane? Do you give indicators? All sorts of decisions that every driver makes on a day-to-day basis, even though there is AI insight sitting in front of them, telling them which turn to take.
Yeah.
Right? Similarly, HR, if you think about it, AI tells you, strategic workforce planning in 3 years' time. There are tools available today that will tell you that in 3 years' time, you will need X skills more than what you have or less than what you have, locations where you have your skills, are they integrated well or not? At its best, you can really get AI to do that. Right? I'm not even going down to matching CVs with JDs. Right? But can it tell you how to deal with that transition? What culture are you going to create to ethically transition those people who have a skill set that you've used so far, but would need to be reskilled going forward to add value to their profiles, right? So I think that's where the role of HR becomes more critical going forward. In the way we are approaching workplace today, I still remember, Ravi, years ago, I used to get very happy when I could create some insight for my leadership about attrition and which pockets of teams attrition was high and all of that stuff, right? It doesn't work anymore now, right? But what I need to do today is that information that automatically gets generated, much more insightful than I could have ever generated. Where do I use that information in driving decision making for the leadership?
Absolutely.
Right. And I feel that's the way where HR value has to evolve going forward.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sanjeev, for your perspective. Moving on, the future of HR leading with purpose and not just process. Nathan, what should HR leaders focus on to ensure that as workplaces evolve, the human element remains central to leadership and decision making, according to you?
According to me, people who join organizations, they do so for two reasons. One is they feel that they can learn. The other one is that they can grow. But more importantly, many people who join organizations look to see if they can bring their complete of themselves into an organization. Am I being valued for what I am? And then you start to move. First, you seek a job, and then you say, I hope I get a job in the right company. And the right company in my early days was, I hope it pays me well. I hope it has a good work culture and all that. And then you start to look at some of the policies that the organization has. And then you ask yourself, hey, is this consistent with what I wish to do? And let me give you an example. Several years ago, I got a job with a certain company which is famous for its genetic seeds. And this is a US-based organization. And I, as part of the process, I was taken to the US. We had rounds of interviews. And it was a fairly important, big job here in India and a lot of things associated with it. And finally, when I sat back at home, thinking through the whole thing, I asked myself, what do I really want to do? And when I asked myself what I really want to do, I wanted to work in a company which does good for the environment. And I found that my purpose was at variance with this particular organization. And I felt really silly. I should have thought about this even before I had even been tapped on the shoulder. But it wasn't too late. I managed to convince everybody, but it stayed with me. So one is, what is the organization? What is the purpose? And what are the fallouts of some of the purpose that the organization drives? So that's one. Deep level, we work in organizations because there is a purpose that we have. And some of us will over a period of time, think about it. And Sujatha, in passing, talked about being a coach. And it's important to look at those that side of me, which is so much within me that could be of value to others. Then my life, for example, my life purpose is to help people realize their potentiality. That's my life purpose. This is what I want to do, whether in organizations or anywhere outside. If I can help somebody realize who they really are, then I think that's a life well lived. That's a job well done. Now you ask me, where did you get all this? Now, it was not like I was designed this way. Many years ago, I was working in a factory. And in a factory environment, they don't tell you the reason why you have to do a few things. Like, for example, I was sent to be with a supervisor who was supposed to be a very good supervisor. And in those days, they never told you why you should do what you're going to be doing. So this supervisor was a person who was supervising the construction of roads at this particular site. And so I went and met Mr. Yadav. So I said, Yadav ji, aap kya kar rahe hain? And he said, aap mere saath aiye, this, that, etc. And we went to the site. And all he did was he got 6 of his men to dig roads. And to the side of the road, they started digging the roads. And after some time, I noticed that these guys were getting bored stiff. They just wouldn't do anything. And it was close. It was pretty hot in those days. And this was in Bihar. And the sun shone mercilessly down on us. And everybody was tired. But the supervisor, he noticed that all the workmen were just faffing. So he pulled everybody together and he said, do you know why we are doing what we are doing? So everybody stared at him and he said, well, we are trying to lay a pipeline which will take water all the way to the workers' colony where you guys live. And we want to make sure that there is non-stop supply of water in a place where you would have no more than 3 hours of water a day. That's all that he said. And almost like magic, post that, everybody was making sure that they were giving the best. The crowbars went deep into the ground. And of course, in those days, you didn't have JCBs and all that. But to me, as a management trainee, it was like, my God, that's the light bulb. I still remember that story because it made so much of sense. So if there is a purpose that people have, and in human resources, back to the question that you asked, it's important for us to communicate that. And for us to also realize why people work in organizations. For example, it is so easy to say, this person is no good. I quite like the idea of look at the extremes as much as you look at what is there within a finite curve. You look at the extremes as well. The extremes could also tell you that somebody is really lousy in something or somebody is really good at something. And if you can find value in letting people know that we admire them, we like them, and we would like to give more so that they discover their edge in what they are doing, I think communicating that purpose is important. So once you have, on one side, you have an organizational purpose. For example, in the company where I worked for a very long time, the purpose is making an impact that matters. In anything that you do, making an impact that matters. That was the purpose of the organization. Whether you do it for clients, whether you do it for people, anything that you do with life, beyond work, anything. So if HR leaders are able to communicate this value of what is the true purpose, then you see, then people want to go to work because there is a purpose beyond all of this. And if you'll give me one more minute, I'll give you one more story.
Sure.
So one of the giants that we have in the petrochem industry, PSU, they were having serious problems because they were trying to lay a lot of gas pipes to people's homes in certain villages. Why? Because their supervisor, he didn't find meaning in this, and then he didn't have his workers, very similar kind of an environment that the story that I said before. And then one day, the person who was really the person who was a project director, he came on and he noticed that things were really slowing down. So he went up to everybody, pulled everybody into a room, and he put up a chart which says, did you know that 14.5 lakh people in the country die of fumes generated by the chulhas in the huts that you have in villages? And then there was silence all over. I says, what we are attempting to do is to make sure that we remove the chulha, which is where you use charcoal, and then because of lack of ventilation, the carbon monoxide is inhaled and over a period of time, leading to several deaths. So this person said, we are going to make sure that we have a gas pipe which goes right in, no more cylinders, but then people would have a constant supply of good gas in their house. And and then he had a pregnant pause and he says, the purpose of what we are doing is saving a life every day, each day. And suddenly the entire thing was transformed. I mean, you had a lot of people going up and says, hey, what are you doing? They're not saying I'm cutting this line, I'm joining this pipe, I'm making sure. No, he says, I'm saving lives. So the ability for any leader, why only an HR leader? An ability of a leader to talk through a purpose. It's so meaningless to throw over a piece of job and say, do this job. But if you're able to conjoin all that and put that in a holistic way, you release potential of people. So, Ravi, very long answer. Back to you.
Thanks so much, Nathan. I think a lot of stories over there. I love that. Love those. So moving to the next segment now. So each of you have to ask one question. So Sujatha, can you start with asking question to Sanjeev first, and then to Nathan?
So, my question to you, Sanjeev, would be, organizations tend to use a lot of pattern analysis to identify a problem area in the HR space that they want to work on or improve upon, right? What do you envisage as areas that the HR leadership might want to start working on in organizations? Because here we are talking about using AI. I mean, AI has been around since the 1950s. We've been using it to identify problems, all of that. From 1970 to 1980, there's been a slight acceleration, but we know how it has, snowballed into something much larger in the last couple of years. So it's not like AI and automation haven't been around, but it's a different avatar today. So I want to understand how you would envisage different kinds of problems that might be identified to drive organization, HR leadership in your organization.
Thanks, Sujatha. I think what I understand, right, there are two elements to how the technology has advanced. One is analytics, automation, making it faster, easier to achieve something, right? Analytics is giving you a bit more of tool information to make decisions. What AI has done is added a layer on top, which basically takes away the grunt work out of the jobs that, so you had a lot of data, but you still had to analyze. Now AI can do the analysis for you and give you in simple English some recommendations. That's how the progress has happened. As we, take it forward, tomorrow we will see that agentic AI will also action some of those recommendations. So you don't even have to action that you currently have to action. So that's the line that we are seeing, the S-curve that we are seeing. Now, how does HR leverage all of this capability that it is coming through now? I think the piece that for me is most important is HR has to upskill itself in understanding AI and using AI beyond the chatbot version of it. Right? You spoke about design with a lot of passion, and across the world of HR, how many HR professionals you've come across today who focus on employee experience as a discipline? How many handbooks do you see which are easy to find what you're looking for? How many employee portals have you seen which are user-friendly and very attractive to engage with? How many policies you've seen that are written in such a manner that it tells you upfront in a paragraph what it actually means, right? So there's a lot of work that HR can actually take forward. And those tools are much more readily available today than ever before. So for me, I think that's where the opportunity lies.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Sanjeev. I think what you said is there's a way in which we can pivot the work that happens using AI. It doesn't have to just be the chatbots, but the agentic AIs, like you said. But we're also going beyond that. There is a lot of data that needs to be explored and identified, and then work can be done along those lines. Thank you, Sanjeev. So with that, my question to Nathan, I love the piece that you brought up about purpose, because a lot of organizations are talking about purpose-driven engagements? How can we accentuate experiences for individuals? How can we see an alignment between what an individual feels and wants to contribute towards, and what is the organization standing for? All along the alignment and purpose space. I'm just wondering, given the current situation, right, and I'm what we're currently going through. We have the tariffs happening here. We have an exodus of work from various technologies moving into the AI space. We're also looking at probably some kind of challenges in the pipelines of various organizations and all of that. So, given these situations, individuals have purposes, organizations have purposes as well. We're talking about responsible AI. We know a lot of organizations are putting in a lot of effort in that direction. Now, and we also know that we have only about 21 to 23%. The last count that I got from from Harvard was about 21 to 23% of organizations have only embraced automation and emerging technology. So there's a lot of scope out there. Given these changes in the ecosystem, how do you think that organizations should guide their employees, their talent, to believe a lot more in the purpose? Because there are challenges out there. To believe in embracing technology in some form and aligning their values with the organization's purpose, or aligning the purpose as well.
A great question. I think these tumultuous times is kind of sinusoidal. We have seen them in the past. We will continue to see them. The intensity on the Richter scale could be different. But otherwise, these quakes keep coming and they will abate. I think it's important for us to prepare people for this. I saw a video recently where large, almost towns have been completely flattened by earthquakes. And in other part, or not very far from there, you had skyscrapers when nothing happened to them. All that happened was they just shook a little bit and something happened and nothing. There was no loss of life. And then you start to think, what could be the difference between one vis-a-vis the other? And I read about this. The amount of effort that one takes in planning and preparing for the future is the one that is a differentiator. Or even if something has come right up, and for us to then deal with that on even keel is even more important. For instance, this whole notion of what is happening around. I think the first thing that we have to do is we have to prepare our own leaders. The greatest opportunity that CEOs have today is to make sure that we have an aligned leadership, and the collective purpose of this particular team is going to be important, because then they communicate what they have vis-a-vis the organization. I remember when we had this AI so-called tsunami coming down, there was a lot of effort many organizations had taken just to let leaders know what AI is about. And no different today, we have to do that with HR leaders and get them to understand what AI is. And of course, a nuanced way of saying, okay, this is what it could shut off, and therefore you got to keep your judgment around you when you do that. Way back, let's talk about 1990s, when automation was coming in full force. People were thinking about loss of jobs. Now, if you remember the effort that organizations had taken then to assuage people's fears by not saying don't be afraid, but by saying, okay, this is what it can do for us. Let's look at what is the opportunity quadrant that we are going to address. It requires tremendous amount of communication I think no communication. So that's one on one hand. The second one is so communication is all about building awareness. The second one is what I believe in, which is action. So we should get people to look at what are the specific actions that they have to take. Which means if you are a leader, you better know enough about what you have in AI that's going to help you in what you are about. So that is action. The last one today is all about acceleration, which is beyond all the actions. Now, how can you charge ahead? Because then you get into what I call as leadership position. Rather than being a laggard, you will then become a leader. So all this in the context of, see, when you go back to our books, what is the purpose of an organization? The purpose of an organization way, way back, the way I read this was survival and then growth. So when people talk about their survival, there's also the context of an organization survival and growth. Today, the third word is thrive. How do you thrive in this? Then you put all this together and say, okay, now how do we do this? Fortunately, today, we have a whole band of very intelligent, excited young professionals who have joined the industry. I think it's important to get them to do a collective think and look at the art of possible. And then we might be able to take so much away from the wisdom of just these so-called novices, because that what they would create would be path-breaking. Back to you.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much, Sanjiv. I think it's beautiful when you spoke about Thrive, bringing the current or the new generation into the folds, and actually like a reverse mentoring from them, actually gathering some of the things, insights that they have through the art of the possible, and looking at a 10x growth, because like you said, these challenges will come and they would also pass. So it's important for us to stay prepared. AI first, but people first, and making sure that action first, the other part of what you mentioned, which is action first. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Sanjiv. Your question to Sujatha.
Thanks, Ravi. I'm loving this format of yours. You are doing less work. Going back to Sujatha, you spoke about your coaching experience and the richness around it. Where do you see coaching playing a role in the future of HR?
I think coaching has a very integral role to play even today, right? So we're talking about engagement, we're talking about communication, we're talking about personalization and hyper-personalization in some cases. We're talking about inclusivity, right? For all of these aspects, and there are many more. So it's about learning, it's about impact. And for all of these, I think it's important for us to understand that we're talking about people. We're not talking about bodies anymore. And I think we've not been talking about bodies for a very long time. So we're talking about sentient organizations that can experience, that can feel, sense, and then take action. So it becomes important. It has always been important, but it also depends on how the organization is structured, and also how large the organization is. How relevant does coaching become for the organization? Because we're talking about whether we have the bandwidth, and the wherewithal might be there, but the bandwidth may not be there. So it's important. So whether we are talking about a conversation or coaching, and it's important to distinguish the two. While I speak with individuals from various organizations, what I gather is a quick conversation is also taken as a coaching conversation. And a coaching conversation isn't about advising somebody, right? It's about taking the individual's potential through the individual to the next level. It's not about, it's like being the sage by the side, right? You're not, you're the guide by the side, not the sage on the stage. And being able to differentiate the two. So in some organizations, I see BPHR playing the role, doubling up as an individual who listens to employees as well as becomes a coach. And in some organizations, we also have managers doing that. And I think it's about understanding the ethics of actual coaching. And once we are able to distinguish that and then say that as part of the framework, here are some people in the organization who can be coaches, who've been trained coaches, and here are individuals in the organizations who can listen to what you have to share. I think it's important because when we mix the two, I think we have faced challenges because then it becomes an advisory role and we're not looking at coaches as holding its advisory positions, but we're talking about them hand holding the individual through the journey. So is coaching important in organization? Absolutely. But the how inclined is the organization to give the time for coaching to all individuals in the organizations or to handpick high potentials or tiered leaders in the organization who go through the coaching? If that's the case, what about the rest? Because we're talking about a large number of people in the pyramid who need coaching, who probably may not have the access to it. In that case, are these partnerships possible outside the organizations where they can reach out? But the role of a coach in the journey of an employee or any kind of a talent, whether it is on life coaching, executive coaching, spiritual coaching, or leadership coaching, I think is extremely important, but depends on the organization. But in the absence of the organization providing that kind of a platform, there are so many individuals who now understand the role of coaching and who reach out to coaches and make sure that that's part of their journey. So, yeah, that's how it is. It's very, very important.
Thanks. I learned a new word, spiritual coaching. I haven't heard that before.
Yeah, they also call it mindful coaching. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I thought they would be different. But anyway, Nathan sir, I have read, big fan of some of the content you put out and your book, actually. Question for you is, you spoke about new talent coming into HR. If you were to hire an HR leader today for future, what would you look, which will be different from what you have done so far in all your hiring?
Today, if I were to look for an HR professional, I would look for the following three things. Does the person have passion? I mean, a huge amount of passion. I mean, the person must, I'm not looking at visible passion, but what I call as passion within the self. And there are ways to check whether a person has that. So that is one. The second one I look for is energy. Energy is very important to me, Sanjeev. Again, two types of energy, what I call as the quiet energy and the ostensible, visible energy that people have. I think it's important to have people with loads of energy. We are already in a world where the most important component, everybody, his uncle, aunt, and relatives are working on this whole thing around energy. So that's the second thing. Third one that I would look for is, I would look for an HR professional who's very curious. Very curious. Why is this so? Why should this happen? Because a curious mind will beget a lot of very curious things that they unearth. And the ability then, and being a student of mathematics, one of the things that I love is patterns. So if you ask me, what I really love is, what is the pattern in all of what is happening around us? Once you get to see that there is a pattern, whether you use statistics or whether you use AI, there is a discernible pattern around it, then we'll be able to get to answers. Of course, you are looking for people who would be able to say things like the emperor has no clothes. I mean, if there is a fourth, I would just add this. Our ability as HR professionals has always been, how do you say it in a way that that you don't really disturb the environment. I think the world needs to hear people who say things as they are. So if I, today's generation, and I'm not making it very broad based like but completely alien generation, I think the generation today looks at things as is, but their ability to say things as they are is a function of the organization as well. So, as much as you're looking for people, I think within organizations, we should create an environment where people can say things without fear, where the head is held high and the mind is without fear, the Tagore Gitanjali kind of thing. So that's why. So, three qualities, all three absolutely important. This is all things being equal, whether, and last but not the least, I'll say this is our penchant for getting people with very high scores in the GMAT and SAT. And I think we should move away and look really for people who are creative, who have the ability of very good communication skills, apart from the three qualities I just spoke about.
Thanks. Very, very interesting. Thank you.
Nathan sir, your question to Sujatha.
So, Sujatha, again, you worked in large organizations. And one of the things that I'm very curious about is, as much as coaching is about a one-to-one, and today the world needs one-to-many, how do you really create a coached organization?
Yeah, and I agree with you, because I don't think we'll be able to sustain in a one-to-one coaching ecosystem, and which is the reason why we have a lot of team coaching. There's a lot of group coaching that is being encouraged today, but it also gives different perspectives to individuals within, and it doesn't necessarily have to be part of a single team. We can have cross-functional teams coming together, and I think that's about collective wisdom coming together. It's about brilliant minds coming in with different perspectives, which might be agreed or disagreed by the rest. And I think that coaching journey is also very beautiful. So a one-to-many group coaching, I think it's also about a culture, because in that culture, we're talking about trust. In that culture, going back to something that you mentioned earlier, which is courage, to have the fire in the belly, to be curious. These traits are important to also be a part of a trusting culture. And the trusting culture is not a one-way street. It's not just an organization. It's the individual also who needs to contribute and feel vulnerable to be part of the process. Because for group coaching, there's a lot of vulnerability out there. And the safe space that is created by the individual for himself or herself, by the team who is getting coached, and the organization in terms of confidentiality and making sure there is enough authenticity in the conversations is important. And when with all of this, we're talking about neuroplasticity. We're talking about a mind where sometimes for a similar situation, we individuals and groups might behave in a particular manner or respond in a particular manner. And in some other situations, they might respond in a slightly different manner. And for the coach who is engaging and facilitating or coaching the group, it's about being able to toggle between the two, to be comfortable in their own presence and not having the pressure of being right out there. The vulnerability is not just, and it's across the ecosystem. It's about the coach who can feel vulnerable. The coach doesn't have to be right always. The coach can be part of the process, just like the individuals in the group are part of the process. And that becomes a very authentic group. But to bring the group to that level, there's a lot of effort that is required in identifying probably small groups small groups, and then extrapolating it to larger groups, talking about the success of group coaching, but ensuring the ethics and the values of coaching are not diluted at any point in time. One of the one of the challenges I've seen when I've had group coaching sessions is this piece around confidentiality. Are we willing to hold each other's challenges and the pain that they might be going through or the successes that they're going through together within this space? So, and that, I think that's those are beautiful moments that individuals go through, and it creates a sense of oneness among. And then there's a lot of maturity that I've seen emerging within the group when the group is able to elevate its experiences and build that kind of a comradeship with each other as part of the coaching process. So, in response to your question, Nathan, are we? I mean, how can we look at uh, organizations and coaching experiences in groups and organizations and not just keeping it at an individual level? Absolutely, but there's a lot of work that is required in that space, and there are organizations that are doing it, and there are individuals who are working to drive that for individuals in various organizations. There are successes, definitely.
Thank you, Sujatha. I think you put that really well. One-to-many starts at both levels, both at an individual level as well as an organizational level, and then slowly bringing it in, creating safe spaces, making sure that boundaries are maintained, and how do you then start to expand that border to the larger organization. Very well put. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the question, Nathan.
Thank you. So, Sanjiv, it's very interesting. I've always been fascinated with, on one hand, organizations are looking for highly talented people.
Mm-hmm.
And the country has very highly talented people. All of them are in different places, almost like you're going to mine for them all over. So if there is a magic way in which you manage to get highly talented people for organizations, what would you suggest to organizations to say, hey, listen, I think if you wish for a magic wand, I think these are the components that you will put into that wand, and that would get you the piece that you wish?
If I had the answer of that question, Nathan sir, I won't be sitting here. But hypothetically, should that wand exist in life, I think it's okay. So first, I think a lot of times organizations are not clear on what is it that they really want. That is where the first break in the system happens.
Spot on.
Right? If you read the JDs and then you read how they're shortlisting people, sometimes it's not really coherent. Then the process of really filtering, shortlisting, etc., has lots of handoffs and therefore breakages, because the person who's making the first filter on the CV is not the person who probably prepared the JD or the person who spoke to the hiring manager or who understood everything that is there, which needs to be taken care of in that role, right? So there are a number of handoffs. Now, of course, with technology, some of this is getting better and all of that stuff, but I still feel my criticism of the recruitment technology solutions that I've seen so far, and I've not seen a lot, but whatever I've seen, is we're trying to replicate the current process into technology-enabled process. And we almost have to not do that to really find the solution for next level. We have to reimagine this for the purpose we want to build it, rather than just replicate the manual process into a workflow solution. And I think that's where today we see omnipresent noise in recruitment. No matter who I talk to, recruitment is one pain point that continues to exist. Right? I won't even go into the experience side of it, candidate experience, hiring experience. I mean, I don't think we have reached today a place where we can be very proud of that as a function in that sense. But just the process itself. Then the second piece is, how do you assess people for what you need? Because, we can put a filter paper on any liquid, it will filter something, That doesn't mean it will filter what we really want to filter. So a lot of times I find, again, dissonance between what is it that we really have advertised for and what are we testing people for. And sometimes there is no correlation. Organizations are stuck to those 4 assessment tools that they have paid for and subscribed to, and therefore everybody goes through that process sometimes. Sometimes managers have preferences for what they want to do. I've seen all types of filter processes, assessments getting applied across the board. And, effectiveness is really, there's no real measure for what is getting effective selection or not. And then lastly, I feel the interview process itself is very inconsistent. We need to invest a lot more as a function in making better interview skills. Right? Generally, people become managers and they are thrown into interviewing people. And interviewing is very, very nuanced. It's not something you ask 5 questions, somebody gives you the right 5 answers and they're fit. And that's where I think not enough investment happens. We expect people to learn on the fly. Right? So there's a lot of things that can really go wrong in the whole process, and people getting selected through that, in my view, is a miracle. Now, I'm not saying all recruitment is bad or all recruitment doesn't happen properly. There are lots of people who, who go through the process and really are great hires. But is it by design? I'm not so sure. We tend to look at recruitment as a process. I think recruitment is a strategic intervention for any organization. It is as critical to an organization's success as any other strategic initiative. But I don't think we invest enough in this right now.
Brilliant, Sanjeev. I mean, one point that you talked about, you talked about filters, and you will filter unknowingly a lot of things. And I'm in my mind, what was going on was something like this, that in the process of filtering, you could actually be filtering out the talent that you really need. So you have no idea that there is liquid gold, which is glowing right through your filters, and you would have no clue about it, not because that was something that you really wish to miss, but we treat this as a process. And even the process operators are not trained enough. And I think you're laying great emphasis both on what's the filter that you would use, which is in some ways saying horses for courses. How do you get the right fit for what you need? But more importantly, your entire accent on making sure that the people who are dealing with these same old stuff, although now technologically enabled, if you are able to now recast it into a new mold, you still need somebody who's a very good operator and who does not treat this as another process, but this is almost as excited as saying, I'm going to discover something in somebody. Hey, thank you, Sanjeev. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much, 3 of you. I think this is a dream HR in the Trio series. Nathan, Sanjeev, and Sujatha, thanks so much for your time. As we close, I think one message stands out. Technology can inform us, but only humanity can transform us. And speaking of presence, Nathan, before we wrap up, we'd love to for you to share the story of your grandmother, please. You just have 5 more minutes, so yeah.
Okay. I don't know why you caught on this. I could have told you so many other stories. But anyway, let me humor you, Ravi. Thank you for the opportunity. I think one of the best parts about these kinds of podcasts is that you get to listen to people who normally you would not be able to listen to. So my opportunity to listen to you, certainly Dr. Sujatha and Sanjeev, whom I'm meeting after a very, very long time. Thank you. You brought us together. So sometimes I ask myself, am I lucky? And I would say that yes, I am. I'm truly lucky. I'm one of those very rare lucky guys. I have no idea how I'm sitting where I am and talking to all of you. So why am I saying all this? So once there was an old woman, And this woman had just all of but one leg. She used to walk around in crutches, and she was very mindful that, in these crutches, they have at the edge, as they strike the ground, there is a rubber bush. It's called a ferrule. So she used to make sure that the rubber bushes, the ferrules, were always in good repair. Because she used to say, this is more important because this is the one that grips. And and this woman used to live in a almost like a chawl. She had a huge dining room, bedroom, kitchen, living room, everything, which is almost like 11 by 8. It's a very, very small room. Everything was there. 14 people. 14 people, and what they had as a privacy curtain, there were no doors, was a lot of jute bags which were sewn together to make that privacy curtain. So to give you an idea, so this is a woman who's trying to raise a family of children and doing so within her means. And one of the things that I loved about this woman was that every day in the evening, this old lady, she used to walk around, and she gets to the room which is most important for everybody, which is the drawing room. And what is the drawing room? This is the sidewalk or the pavement of or just outside. You have the road, you have the pavement. So she used to sit on the pavement, which was her drawing room. And a lot of children would mill around her wanting to listen to her stories. So every day she used to talk about stories, all kinds of stories, Ramayana, Mahabharata, you name the stories. She possibly could come out with some new ones every now and then. And we all used to love listening to her. One day, as she was recounting one of her stories, one of the boys in that group got distracted and was not listening to her, was looking someplace else. And this old woman got very upset, and she slapped that boy. And the boy suddenly had tears welling in his eyes, and he looks at the old lady and says, Grandma, why did you beat me? She says, I slapped you because you're not paying attention to me. She says, Grandma, I'm really sorry. There was a car that went past, a black, shiny car, and I want to know if I can ever sit in a car. Now, this is a boy who used to go to a local corporation school and was not, again, his parent just had about enough to make sure that he gets some little bit of formal education. And this old lady looked at the boy and looked him in the eye and says, Child, you want to sit in a car? Make sure that you sit in the driver's seat, and you must drive that car. That car must be yours. And then she says, if you're going to sit in the rear seat, then the car must be yours. The driver must be somebody that you should pay every month. And this child had all kinds of but stars in his eyes and looks at the grandma and says, Grandma, you think that I can sit in a car? And she says, of course. All you have to do is work a little bit harder. And most importantly, dream about it every day. Child, you will sit in a car. Every day, when I sit in my car and I head out to work or any place, I feel very privileged. Because the old lady who spoke that day and the boy who got slapped are related. The boy who got slapped is speaking to you. That old lady is my very own grandmother. I owe a lot to her because she gave me hope. But more importantly, she gave me a dream. She always used to say, if you can dream it, you can get it. And all it requires is a little bit of an effort. Well, that's the story, Ravi. I'm still enchanted. So anytime when I think very deeply that this is what I need, this is what I deeply desire, magic. I get it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nathan. We have something called these Balvika's classes over here where youngsters normally come. And this is one story which they love and they ask me to keep repeating it. So I take your name and actually go through it. Grateful is what I can only say to three of you, Sanjiv, Sujata, and Nathan. Acuity is a very, very small company. It's just an OPC. It's not a big one. But having three of you in one screen means a lot for me. So really grateful for taking time. So close to an hour or so.
May I say something, Ravi?
Please go.
So Ravikant, Nathan, that was such a fabulous way. It's like it just took this conversation to a crescendo because we are talking about HR and you spoke about, the experience of giving hope and getting people to dream big. And I think it's a fantastic culmination to this exchange of ideas that we had. Thank you so much for asking him for the story, Ravi. And thanks so much, Nathan, for sharing this lovely story.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sujata. Thanks so much, all of you. I'll reach out to you individually again. This episode will be out, I think, within a week, and there'll be a lot of teasers on LinkedIn from starting today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Sanjiv, thank you very much. I hope to bump into all of you someday, sometime. Sure. Bangalore is a very small place. I'm sure we'll catch up.
Yes, we will.
Bye.
Thanks, Nathan. Thanks, Sanjiv. Thanks, Ravi. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye. Cheers.
Cheers.